Real in the studio with your host, Jeff and Nabil. And Nabil, how's your day?
It's going great. We're just coming off of that long weekend,
Yes.
and we're ready to hit the ground running for conference.
Absolutely. Happy Labor Day to everybody. In celebration of labor and, the laws that have changed to enable safer workspaces, prohibiting child labor, those kind of things. We should have done a labor law special, perhaps.
Yeah.
But,
Wait, that's what Labor Day is? I don't know the background of Labor Day, so.
So I'm pretty sure that's true. So, I don't actually know a lot about Labor Day, but yeah. So
That sounds right.
It's a federal holiday to honor and recognize the American labor movement. And, because like a long time ago, there were no laws on labor, right?
Right.
So that's why we would send
There's the Wild
children
West.
into coal mines and those kinds of things. And so, yeah, we celebrate that as some of the achievements that we've had and some of the labor laws, those kinds of things where they've negotiated and settled on, 5-day work weeks and 40-hour work weeks and overtime pay and all that kind of thing. Yeah, that's what a lot of that's about. So,
Interesting.
go check out, probably go to like the Wikipedia page or something and find out more. So, happy Labor Day to everybody. And, realtors are out there saying, no, 5-day work week. Yeah, right. Weekends are a fiction.
That's true, right?
They're legal fiction and they're an actual fiction. So anyway, it's a random start to the episode. But happy Labor Day, everybody. Here we are, less than a week out. We are just a handful of short days ahead of OAR's annual conference.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? It's never too late to register.
It is not. So you can register online or you can register in person.
Yeah.
So there's, the official registration has ended, but late registration is still an option.
Absolutely. So go on over to oarconference.com, see the schedule of events and everything we have planned. A lot of exciting things we're going to be doing for all of our routine and regular listeners. We will, as we typically do, we will have a live talking real recording. It's going to be a little bit different format this year. We're kind of excited about it. We're going to do something a little bit fun and different.
You got to be there to find out.
Maybe here's a little, in honor of football season starting. We'll have a little kind of it's not sports themed, but maybe we're stealing the ideas of some sports related media. So,
ooh, what could it be?
It'll be fun. I hope you guys will join us. There's lots of really exciting things going on over downtown at the Omni. And we're going to have a lot of cool stuff. Sunday, I'm excited about Sunday Fun Day. We're going to be out there in Singapore Park having a good time.
Yep. That would be fun.
Having a fun time. So come join us. Please do. We really look forward to it, and I hope y'all will be there.
But not Scissortail Park, the Botanical Gardens.
Sorry, the Botanical Gardens. Yeah. So come check it out.
Yeah.
We'll have a good time. We're going to talk a little bit today. So at the end of our recording here, we've got Lee Caesar Jr. coming in. He's going to be doing another really fun and unique educational program at the conference. It's it's not going to be just him up there talking, but going to do kind of a fun thing that's going to be interactive with the crowd, talking about sort of appraisals, and he's going to walk through sort of how a realtor might value a property and then how an appraiser does it, and so we can kind of get this inside track of like how do appraisers do their jobs. Really interesting.
Yeah, and if you listened to the episode where Lee Caesar Jr. was on, it kind of goes hand in hand with what he was talking about, and I think this will give you a very clear picture of how appraisers and realtors can work together to make sure there's no issues during the appraisal process.
Absolutely. So we're going to bring him in at the end of this episode for a few minutes. So something to look forward to there. But first, we got to talk about some legal issues.
That's right.
A cautionary tale, as it were.
Not labor legal issues.
Not labor legal issues. Not at all. We had an interesting case come down the pipeline here from the Oklahoma Court of Civil Appeals. And this involves a real estate company and a realtor. And the issue here involves wire fraud, which here's a little bit of trivia for you. What was our very first Talking Real episode about? Wire fraud was one of those things.
That's crazy.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
A long time ago, almost, 4 years ago, our first episode.
Yeah, it was Bitcoin and wire fraud.
Yep.
Wow. That's very true. So would you say wire fraud is our favorite topic on the most recurring topic?
I think that internet security, cybersecurity, those kinds of things are probably our most visited and revisited topic.
Yeah. Wow. Because they change. almost every day.
Absolutely.
Like there's so much change happening in that.
Yeah, and it always bears repeating. And so this case deals with these issues, right? And so to kind of give you an overview of what happened in this case, and this occurred back in 2016, but the case just now came down in 2021 from the Court of Civil Appeals. So it tells you how long litigation can happen. So this is a 5-year case in the making. And so what happened here is you had a buyer of a property who hired a realtor, right? Hired a real estate agent, a real estate company to broker the purchase of real estate. Right? That's where we kind of start out here.
It's a very official way of saying it.
Absolutely. So you've got a real estate licensee brokering the purchase of real estate for a buyer. And the buyer received an email which appeared to come from the realtor, and it was instructing him to wire just under $54,000 to a particular Bank of America account.
So this is a classic wire fraud. Email looks like it came from the broker or realtor, basically the entity that's going to be requesting the money. And a lot of people, looks legit, they're expecting it, will click it, and do exactly what happened in this case.
Exactly. So the buyer takes the information, this email, who he thought was from the realtor, goes into the bank and wires this almost $54,000. Turns out wasn't legit, and so the money is gone. So what does he do? Well, the buyer, what does the buyer do? The buyer sues the real estate company. So he sues the brokerage and says, your email was hacked and you have cost me $54,000.
And this is something that we've said every single time we've talked about wire fraud is the person that got frauded out of the money, that's probably a huge chunk of change for them, right?
Absolutely.
This is like one of their biggest purchases, and they're going to be looking towards anyone to make him whole again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in this case, where the email appeared to come from a realtor, he's looking at that saying, well, you screwed up. Like you did something. And in this case, the claim is essentially your email got hacked, and because of that caused harm to me when that hacked email sent me fake wiring instructions. And so what we're talking about here is what we call professional negligence, right? This is it would be like, if it's a realtor or a doctor, you may say like a malpractice claim, but professional negligence. So it's a negligence claim, and negligence claims require 3 elements. Okay, so for the plaintiff in this case, the buyer, to win, they would have to prove that the defendant, so the brokerage, the realtor, had a duty that was owed to the client to protect them from injury. Right. So step one is, do you have a duty, right? As a realtor, do you have a duty to protect your client from injury, right?
No one could argue, yes.
Right. The second element is that you failed to perform that duty. So you had a duty and you didn't do it. And the third element is that failure to perform the duty was the primary, or what we call the proximate cause of the injury that was caused. Okay, so there's a duty that you have to perform, you failed to perform it, and it caused injury. Right? Those are kind of the 3 elements of a negligence claim. You're getting a torts 101. This is like literally the first thing you start to learn in torts classes.
I like it. So, now, does that have to be, and this might be a case-to-case basis, but that the negligence to perform that duty and that causing this fraud scenario, if we're just taking this as the scenario, does it have to be a direct correlation, or can it be like a causation that led to something else that led to this?
Yeah, so they call it a proximate cause, which basically means like that's the thing that like set forth this chain of events that led to the injury happening. So it is a direct and predictable result that flowed from that failure. It doesn't necessarily, like in this case, it wouldn't necessarily be specifically direct. Like the realtor, it's something else had to happen, right? So the chain of events here was, if the email was hacked, and I say if because we'll talk about that in a moment, but if the email was hacked and that caused these fake wiring instructions to be sent, and that caused the person to then wire the funds to a fraudster and who absconded with their funds, that would be, we could call that perhaps a proximate cause, right? So that injury resulted from that chain.
Yeah,
So,
makes sense.
yeah. So again, that's we sort of have this basic idea of what happened here, and I'm going to go ahead and fast forward to what the result was, because I think we need to talk about the result and then dispel a little bit what you may think that means. So the court in the end, and again, this is an appeal. So there was a trial court level. This got appealed up to the Court of Civil Appeals, who then dismissed the case, basically. So the trial court dismissed the case, and the Court of Civil Appeals upheld that and said, yes, you cannot pursue this claim against this real estate brokerage. Basically, your claim fails. Okay. Now, I want to dispel the idea that if you hear about this, that means that, oh, well, we can't be held liable for wire fraud for a buyer.
Right. This isn't what lawyers would call it case precedence.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely precedence, but but I don't want that to be the conclusion anybody thinks, is that like, oh, well, in this case, the company wasn't held liable, right, so we can't be held liable. That's great, big win. That's not really what happened here. Okay, this is more the evidentiary standard that you have to prove, and like how you go about proving your case. Okay, so this wasn't just a win of you did everything right or whatever. This is almost more like a procedural issue, but this lays out sort of a foundation for what a wire fraud case might look like against a real estate company. And I think that this is what is really instructive to say. The court doesn't say that you can't hold a realtor liable or a real estate company liable. That's not at all what they're saying. Mm-hmm. Instead, they're saying you didn't do it right in this case to be able to prove it correctly.
So it's still setting precedents, but for a different matter, essentially, is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, so it's still possible, right? Yeah. I mean, this case does not clearly say that a real estate company can't be held liable, right? So what actually happened here? Well, again, this is almost sort of a procedural lack of evidence type thing, okay? Because the plaintiff in this case said that, well, defendant, real estate company, your email was hacked and you failed to comply with your duty to protect me as a client because your email was hacked and it cost me this money, it caused this injury. And there's a couple of things that were going on here. And one, the court basically said that you didn't produce any evidence that the account had actually been hacked.
So this was just his claim because it came through the email. Obviously, something had to be compromised.
Right. Yeah. But you have to actually prove that, right, for one thing. So if you could prove that the account was hacked, perhaps then we could look at the next step of, was there a duty to protect this client, right? Because this is the other thing that happened is the trial court said, well, you have to establish what the duty is that a real estate agent owes to their client. And because we don't know what that is, there's no common understanding about what a person should do, what a realtor should do to protect their client. And in this case, the evidence did show that the defendant did things like, so basically they used the professional Gmail service, so the G Suite kind of thing, and they did use two-step authentication. So that's something we always talk about, two-factor authentication.
So they took steps to protect their email.
Yep. So they did take some steps. And again, the plaintiff, so the buyer in this case, didn't really prove, they didn't offer facts to actually show that the email system was hacked. And the other issue here is that the court said the plaintiff would have to bring in an expert witness to tell us what that duty is that they should do, right? So the duty is, what steps should a real estate company take in order to protect their clients? And because they said that we don't know what that is, that the common juror wouldn't know what that is, that you really have to prove that by using expert testimony, and they failed to do that. Because the question here is, the claim relies on, the defendants, in this case, the real estate company, what security measures they should have, and what did they not do that fell below those that a reasonably prudent real estate company would do, right? So what should they have been doing that every other company out there would be doing if they were being reasonably prudent, if they were being smart about this? What would they do? And what did this company do that failed to meet those standards? And so the only way to do that really is to bring in an expert testimony, a cybersecurity expert, to say, look, these are industry standard things that you should be doing to protect client data, and they failed to do that. So they didn't meet the duty they owed to their client.
So do you think just that extra step would have swayed the decision one way or the other?
I think it certainly could have. And the reason is because this case was dismissed at what's called summary judgment. And summary judgment basically means that even if, like, basically there are no facts in dispute here, right? If all the facts are taken as true, you don't have a claim because you failed to meet the legal requirements for your claim, right? And so that's sort of what happened here. And basically the court upheld this and said, look, there's sort of a couple of issues here. One, they agreed that the lack of expert testimony was an issue because in order to prove that your real estate company failed, basically they breached their duty to protect you, just proving that the email hacked alone may not have even been enough. Right? Like even if you could prove that their email was hacked, that doesn't necessarily mean they failed to take the steps to protect themselves. It just means they still could have been hacked even by doing all the perfect things you're supposed to do.
Right. And then their actions afterwards would impact the decision either way, right? Because it's life, things happen, and you can expect something of yours to get hacked at some point. Yeah, we're playing the probability right now, right?
I was just text messaging with a friend of mine today who I was looking through my spam email that I do every once in a while, and I had this email from him, and to me, it looks like it came from his actual real email address. And I was like, oh, that's weird. So I texted him a picture and said, hey, you may want to change your password and update this. And he's like, oh, that's crazy. And so, I mean, yeah, these things can just happen.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have an answer for all of them. Things happen. And so, like I said, what happened afterwards, right? If you were hacked and you knew it, did you notify clients, say, hey, this is what you had brought up earlier.
Yeah, like if you would be like, hey, our email system has been compromised, please double check with us before you do anything with that. And that's something that we've said in the past is for stuff like this, always have your clients double check with you whenever you're transferring large sums of money or anything like this, just in case.
Yep.
Because you could be very unaware of the fact that you've been hacked.
Absolutely.
And just under the radar, no one knows. But that's always good practice.
Yeah, absolutely. This is why we talked about things in recent years of don't email wiring instructions and have that conversation with your client that, look, we will never email you wiring instructions. So if you get wiring instructions looking like it's coming from me, don't trust it. And always call the bank and verify that, like, is this actually your wiring instructions? The title company, whoever, make sure you're verifying these things.
Right.
And having some disclaimers that are floating around that people would use as well. And so,
so like to dispel the fear of if I'm hacked, I'm in for it. With something like that, you got hacked, you notified, you did kind of what industry standard is, right? That would be enough to protect you.
Yeah.
Barring anything other ridiculous happening.
Right. I think if you're, so first of all, are you doing the things correctly to protect your clients? Are you using two-factor authentication on your work email?
Prevention.
Yes, you're using on the preventative thing. You're using complex passwords. Because I think if you could show, well, my real estate agent was using the password 1, and they weren't using two-factor authentication, and their email got hacked as a result of this, and that caused damage. Well, I think then if you go through the steps right, you could have a claim there that says, look, you're not engaging in industry standards for protecting client data, so you could be liable. And there are cases out there like this in other jurisdictions that can support this, right?
And luckily, most programs are doing that by default. They won't let you put in a weak password.
Right.
But
exactly.
So like their steps are being built in regardless.
Yep, exactly. This is why we talk about having a password keeper that generates complex passwords, those kinds of things. So are you doing all those things that we always talk about? If you are doing those things upfront preventative, that's going to help protect you from a claim in the event something bad happens. And the second thing is, if you do experience a breach of some kind, are you engaging in the proper kinds of notifications and corrective action that happens when that does occur and you find out about it? Right. So those are two kind of separate things. If something does happen, what are you doing in the aftermath to make sure no clients are being harmed, or you're notifying them and so forth? But also, are you engaging in those protective measures? Because if you are, those are the kinds of things that, because this, again, gives you the roadmap for what would it take to sue a real estate company, is you would have to prove that they weren't engaging in basically industry standard cybersecurity practices.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you really need to be examining what are the industry standard cybersecurity practices. We've talked about them a number of times on the podcast, and are we doing those things? If we are, that's going to protect us in the event there is some wire fraud issue, that we can be protected from us being held responsible. Unfortunate as this kind of issue is, because in the end, that's what occurred here is the plaintiff failed to prove that they breached that duty or even what that duty was, right? So that's sort of, again, don't take this to mean that a real estate company can't be held liable. We say absolutely can, but what are you doing to prevent that from happening in the first place in the event wire fraud does occur?
Right. Yeah, and this kind of laid out the steps it could take, and now you know the roadmap, so you just plan ahead.
Exactly.
and just just mitigate any risk.
Yeah. So kind of an interesting case. We can put a link to the case in the show notes if you're interested in actually reading it. It's not terribly long. But again, it's sort of an interesting thing here. So don't take away from that you're immune to liability. That's definitely not the case. It also just as a cautionary tale of, are we engaging in the proper kinds of preventative measures that will protect our client data and adequate cybersecurity measures and so forth. And in this case, the real estate company, they succeeded and basically showed that they were, and that they were not held liable. But at the same time, as we see, because it happened, I mean, this was again something that happened in 2016 and now 2021. The case appears to be finally resolved, and so these things can mire you down for quite some time.
Yeah.
So do everything you can to prevent this from happening in the first place. Protect you, protect your company, and protect your clients.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a perfect way to wrap up the case.
Absolutely. Put a bow on the case.
That's right.
Affirmed.
So affirmed. That's what I was like, that's one of the things I read at the end. I was like, what does that mean? I was going to say in the middle of all of this, when did you go to law school when you've got Jeff?
Yeah.
I've got a class right here on Talking Real.
Right. Hopefully that wasn't, man, we're like kind of getting into the weeds, talking about these things, but hopefully I didn't lose everybody. It gets convoluted for sure. So hopefully it wasn't too...
And the funny thing is, I'm watching Suits right now. I don't know if you ever watched that show.
I haven't.
It's based around the lives of lawyers. And so I'm just like, all these words and, summary judgment and this, all of this stuff is like, huh.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, a little tangent there.
Yeah.
But
So check that out. If you have any questions, email us at podcast@okrealtors.com. We're happy to answer any questions about this on future episodes, this kind of thing.
Right.
But now we need to bring in Lee Caesar Jr.
We do. And just a little plug before we bling in. Hey. Yeah.
Nobody says that anymore.
Before we bring in Lee Caesar Jr., we will have a session on cybersecurity at conference. Deb Thoman is going to be talking about cybersecurity, and it's going to be great. So if you want to brush up on the subject and see how you can protect yourself, you should show up at conference.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to that session. It's going to be fantastic. Deb Thoman's great. I'm really excited about it. Glad she's come in to do that. So check that out now. Let's go ahead and jump in with Lee Caesar Jr. And, as we're heading out here, maybe we should go ahead and let them know what they need to do to make sure that they're getting all these episodes.
That's right. So you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button so you know when the next episode is out. And leave us a rating. Write us a review. 1, we like seeing that. And 2, it helps other people find the podcast.
Absolutely. We appreciate that. So let's jump in. We're going to end here with Lee Caesar. And once we're done with that, then until next time, we'll see you next Tuesday in person at the OAR Conference for a live Talking Real. I don't know that it's going to be on Tuesday.
It's on Monday.
It's on Monday. So we'll see you on Monday, but then we'll release on Tuesday as well if you can't make it. Don't worry. It'll still be available for that. We'll see you guys then.